everyone is a data person, so I guess I should say everyone is a data person and or a data person. And regardless of where you're coming in from today, how you pronounce DATA, what geography you're coming in, what organization, what your role is, welcome. We are happy to see you. So thinking about just a snapshot of who's attending today, we have in the registration of this series a wide representation across multiple sectors and geographies, with the highest number of participants coming from NGOs, academic and local and state governments. 42% of you at this point say that working with data is your primary role. 54% say data informs your work, but not necessarily your primary focus. 4% say, I have little or no interaction with data. We welcome all of you. Again, our motto is we are all data people, regardless of our role. We believe all of us have a part to play in asking good questions, interpreting results, thinking about impact. So that brings us all together today. I see we have a datum, singular datum, or is it datum? See, that's good. These are important extra, what we call outliers. So the agenda today, after a quick welcome and introduction, we're thrilled to have Simon Wong, Chief Technology Officer for the City of St. Louis, kick us off with some thoughts about the value of working collaboratively with data. And then we'll have some folks sharing their knowledge and experience about working collaboratively with Ladder. And after that, we will have some folks sharing about some additional collaborative data tools they have either developed or that you might like to know about. And along the way, we definitely hope to hear from you, some of your ideas and experiences and tools that you find useful for working collaboratively with data or data. So just to think about how we got here, if you are new to the series or new to Data for Social Impact, Data for Social Impact is funded with support from the MasterCard Center for Inclusive Growth. It is based out of the Center for Social Development at the Brown School at Washington University in St. Louis. And we grew in close partnership with the Community Innovation and Action Center at the University of Missouri, St. Louis. And our purpose is to build connectivity and capacity with organizations who are working to increase their impact for and with the communities they serve. And a lot of how that happens, we know, is through data. How do we understand our impact? How do we understand? How do we gather? How do we make sense of the impact that we're having? So how do we go about doing this? We engage social sector organizations and practitioners to see what would be useful for them to help them increase their impact and provide a range, based on the feedback that we receive, we provide a range of offerings, including virtual events like this one and in-person events. We also have a free online course. And at one such in-person event that we had, Bridging Data Divide Summit, that was in May, we had Rachel Wells from DataKind who presented about some of the tools, about Ladder, which the series has focused on, and some of the other tools that they have been developing at DataKind. And the breakout for that session was standing room only. It was very clear there was a lot of energy and excitement for some of these free tools. And we were connected with DataKind to begin with through MasterCard Center for Inclusive Growth. And they have really focused not only on supporting data for social impact as a growing field, but really fostering connections between initiatives in that space, hoping to spark collaborations like this one. We have had such a great time working with Shayna and the DataKind team. This is something we hope will continue after the series, and we hope you will be inspired to think about how can you collaborate with like-minded organizations or initiatives in your field or ecosystem as well. So for those of you who are new to the series, this is how we got here today. This is the final event in a series that has had amazing turnout, and especially as we get towards the holidays, really appreciate you taking the time to be here. We had over 500 people register for the series. On average, we've had about 130 attending each event. And in the polls and surveys, people have indicated that they're learning a lot, they're energized to use the tool, and eager to dive deeper and work collaboratively. So we're excited to build on that momentum today. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce Simon Wong, Chief Technology Officer for the City of St. Louis, to share some remarks. His focus areas are long-range technology planning and strategy, effectiveness of internal operations and programs, and application of technology to improve government services. That's a mouthful. He also works towards equitable access to technology for city residents. And we've had some great conversations about data, the importance of working collaboratively across teams, across orgs, across sectors. And he's been a great friend and supporter of DSI. So thank you for being here. Please join me in welcoming Simon to the space.
Well, thank you for the introduction, Jen Rose, and thank you also to Data for Social Impact and DataKind for your leadership and bringing people together and continuing to build data capacity across the country. Good morning, everyone. I'm pleased to join you today to share a few thoughts to kick off today's session on the value of collaboration and the tools that we might use to make that impact. So for many of us that work in the public sector space or in the nonprofit world, our primary motivation for the work that we do is improving outcomes for the people that we serve, the constituents that we serve. And oftentimes, getting better outcomes requires better collaboration because sometimes the challenges are too big for any one organization to take on itself, or alternatively, we might not have all the data that we need in order to get to understand the nuances of the big picture. And thus, collaboration is necessitated across systems, across partners, across communities. And nowhere was this more evident for us in St. Louis than right after the tornado hit on May 16th of this year, actually. There was an EF3 tornado that tore through some of the St. Louis neighborhoods. And in the aftermath of that, we had hundreds and eventually thousands of people, volunteers that dedicated their time into helping with the cleanup efforts and also the rebuilding efforts that are still ongoing and are predicted to take many, many more months. But as we worked with individuals and organizations and partners, we had nonprofits, we had state and federal agencies that were helping, we had private companies that donated their time. So there was a lot of people putting in a lot of work and consequently also generating a lot of data about the work that they were doing or identifying needs of residents that were still unmet. So we were surfacing data around building inspections, around, like I said, unmet needs, financial assistance, housing and storage, food distribution. There was all kinds of data, and we depended a lot on many of our partners in the region to supply us with that data, including CIAC, which I know Dave is presenting later today. And so just wanted to point out that the amount of collaboration that went into that was absolutely unprecedented, at least in the time that I've been here. And we're still grateful, and the mayor has expressed her gratitude to not only everybody that participated, but also everyone that was willing to share data with us and allow us to get a much better picture of what was happening on the ground, because obviously it overwhelmed what the city itself was able to do. So that is one great example on participation. I think another facet of collaboration that cuts through a lot of work that we do is around equity, right? The data and the graphs that we collect by themselves are not just data points. They represent experiences of people. They represent the actual individuals. They could point out imbalances in opportunity, or they could point out degradation in service levels that we are trying to provide as a city, a municipality, to our citizens. I know, and in those cases when the city does not have the resources to perhaps shine a light on other important issues, we have organizations, and at least in St. Louis, I know a couple that are doing some great work around the Vacancy Collaborative and also around affordable housing. And so hats off to these motivated individuals that collect data and then present it in a way that help educate stakeholders about what the issues that the community is facing. And speaking of equity, there was another program a few years ago called Data for Equity, and I think that was also sponsored by the MasterCard Center for Inclusive Growth. It was a cohort of teams from different cities that came in and with a challenge that they were trying to solve. And I remember being exposed to so many great toolkits and frameworks around the country that people had developed. But also having access to that was great. But I think what was a limiting factor for me during that time was the ability to overlay a lot of this analysis on top of each other. Because we had access to the analysis, but we didn't actually have access to the raw data behind it. I saw a demo. Jen Rose was kind enough to give me a brief demo of DataKind, and I understand that it comes pre-built in with many of the layers that are useful for this kind of analysis. So I'm really tickled to understand what else we could be doing with the tool and how easy it makes some of this analysis going forward, because I think that really expands the data capabilities of a lot of people that are just beginning to dabble in this. And then my final point is and about the tools. I know Lattice is not the only tool, because I think some of the speakers at the end of during the session are going to point out some other tools that people might be using also. A final point about process, right? So data tools are great, but they're not solutions in themselves, right? And I think DSI points this out in some of the feedback that they've gotten, that a lot of value comes out of actually engaging with the process and understanding the right types of questions to ask, understanding who's in the room and who's not in the room, and doing that arduous, gritty work of cleaning the data and building trust with organizations and developing data sharing agreements so that only the right people have access to certain data sets. And so I would concur that is also a very key component of our efforts and helps build data muscle in the region. And so I'll just end by saying that if you remember that collaboration does help and is often necessitated, and if you're centered on equity, and we keep in mind that the process is what is going to help us become better ingesters of data, I think that would all serve us well and help all the communities that we serve. So I will stop there and turn it back over to Shanna.
Thank
you. Thank you for joining.
Thank you so much, Simon, for those great remarks. Really appreciate that. And to that point, in this next section, we wanted to be able to talk with you more about collaboration as it relates to the tool ladder that we've been discussing during this fall webinar series. And so for those who may be joining this webinar series for the first time, I'm Shayna Lee, the Senior Director of U.S. Communities at DataKind. We are a global nonprofit organization that's focused on using data, technology, and AI for positive social impact. And Ladder is one of the tools that we co-created with a social impact organization. I'll reveal that in just a moment. And success for us at DataKind is when our partners have ultimately created data-driven solutions that are adopted widely and contribute positively to sector-level problems. And so as a recap, Ladder is a free mapping analysis tool that ultimately enables social service providers, practitioners, public administrators, and policymakers to collaborate to turn fragmented community data into actionable insights. Those insights enable the ability to uncover service needs, target resources, asset mapping, strengthen partnerships, and inform policy. I'm now going to introduce to you two speakers who are going to talk about that collaborative aspect in the spirit of recognizing, to Simon's point, it's not solely or exclusively about the tools, but also the process. First is Sarah Freimiller. Hopefully I said your name right, Sarah, who is the data specialist with Legal Services of Eastern Missouri. And then our second speaker is Angela Corona, the Health Systems Manager and Health and Hunger Task Force lead for Second Harvest Food Bank of Central Florida. Second Harvest Food Bank of Central Florida, in fact, was a key partner in the development of Ladder. Thank you both so much for joining, and I'll turn it over first to you, Sarah.
Thank you so much. I'm truly excited, and I can't emphasize enough how true it's all about the process has been for me specifically. So I heard about Ladder at the Bridging Data Divides conference, and it's been pretty much every meeting that I've had with DSI, I've learned something new about Ladder and how to use it in between. And it's also really grown our internal processes around mapping. And so after hearing about Ladder, I realized it's another valuable tool along with some other mapping tools we were using. And so I wanted to get the word about it get the word out about it in our organization. And so I had a tech talk. We have regular tech talks every month to discuss different tools that we can use across the org. And it was called, I'm going to share my screen. It was Mapping for Systemic Work. I'm not sure if you can see my screen or not. Can I get a verbal yes? I'm seeing 1 and 2. This is odd.
Not yet. Try again. I just stopped myself, so you
Okay.
should be able to.
Yeah. I see it now. Yes, so this was the presentation, and I showed multiple tools, one of them being Ladder, just looking at, how can our knowledge of our region and of the services we provide really kind of drive ongoing work, and how does a good visual sense of what's going on aid in that. And so that was kind of one of the initial ways of getting the word out about Ladder, was just through an org-wide presentation. Then we had a new tech director hired, and she's been awesome. And she was going through, I'm just going to hop back to the presentation, going through and attending regular program meetings, which is something I love to do as well, just to get an eye on like what are some issues people are having with our database, or what are some data questions that they have that we can solve through, analysis or mapping. And something she identified was that one of our programs, the Health and Education Justice Initiative, they were really curious about having a tool to map the locations of different foster care facilities in the state. And they wanted to kind of use that as an ongoing tool to drive their focus and looking at like the different accreditation and also capacity of each of these providers. So she wrote up a really great user story that I then built on in my next meeting with that program. Pretty quickly, I realized that we needed to address some data quality issues in the underlying data. This is kind of a look at what they came to me with. It is a screenshot of I think this was from a website. The information was up and then it was taken down. They're not sure why, but they had this kind of low quality, like low res image. They had 5 different screenshots and they were like, how do we, kind of get this into a place where we can use it? And so someone was actually building out a like Word document where they were just kind of grouping things. And so I realized, before we even get to the point of mapping, I think we probably need a good way for you to track these data. And it might need to be a little bit more, it might need to have a few more options than Excel if they're going to track like multiple like treatments. So I wanted to actually introduce them to a different tool. This is all part of the process here, which was in this case, Airtable. So I don't know if people have used Airtable, but I find it really kind of intuitive and helpful, and it just looks nice. And you can download it into CSV form. And something I really liked too, as I was building this out, is that, we can download the information here and upload it directly into Ladder in the format that we need to map locations. So this was kind of a tool that came into being because we were looking at using Ladder, which was a fun little side quest that we had. And yes, I did have to enter this information by hand. I tried to upload it via Excel, but I would have had to fix like 300 different issues. And so I thought, I'm just going to get to know these 83 different foster care facilities. And I did type them up. But if anyone has a better way of doing that in the future, I'd be all ears. But the idea is that they can use this in an ongoing way to both build out maps in Ladder, but also if they want to do more analysis by downloading Excels, they can. They can also have different views. They can filter to look at different accreditation types or different locations. So I think it's just, again, a tool that came about because we were thinking about using Ladder in a specific way. And then other questions we had, get slot here. So that was covering the other tools that we might need. A big thing that came up was, well, what are the intended actions of having this tool? And that's an ongoing conversation. And that's also why I love kind of being able to build tools in a recursive way, like in an ongoing kind of looping fashion. And that's something that, even working with DataKind, I've experienced, which is that like I'll make a suggestion and they'll come back with another idea. And so I think it's just a good way of like reflecting on the type of work that you want to be doing as a data specialist, which isn't that like there's the one rule and truth and it's over and it's done with, but that projects can continue having really useful like outcomes and they can continue being built in a way that I think a lot of other projects, I don't know, I just think it's a special thing about the work we do. So we're still working on those intended actions. But one of the things I wanted to look at was just where these different foster care facilities are located in the state. And so I also, let's see, I don't think we've got it under address based. Oh yes, I've got number of beds. So I did create a map that shows just kind of the number of beds that are available in foster care facilities around the state. But I'm interested in playing with this to see if we can have even more that shows up when you hover over that card. So again, I'm just voicing my kind of ongoing questions about Ladder, and you'll probably hear more from me about what I've learned the next time we talk. So that is one option for looking at the data. So right now, the program has this information. They're all owners. They are able to edit this. And that kind of brings me back to my next thought on this, which was how can I build user capacity moving forward? So I think a big goal of mine is like in building these tools, not just having it set up so that people will come back to me and say, hey, something's broken, or hey, we need to add new, items to the list, but providing maybe recordings and trainings so that they can add their own foster care facilities as they find out about them, or they can like edit the existing list. And I think Ladder is clear enough in my use of it that I can imagine just like filming what I'm doing to upload the indicators and sharing that with them. And this program will probably pick it up and run with it. And I think that underlying all of this work is really the reason we're able to do this is well, not only this great support that DataKind is providing, but is that I feel very confident that this is a type of data that is already like publicly available. I'm fine with it being out there on Airtable with them like downloading in Excel, uploading it to Ladder. So as we're working with our client data, especially with vulnerable populations, just continuing to ask like, are we protecting this information in the way that it needs to be protected? Or if it's not that kind of data, who might need to have access to it as a partner? So the good thing is like they're owners of the Ladder map. So if they have other partners outside of the organization that they want to share with down the road, they would be in a good place to do so. But I am not here to talk about external org partnerships. That's Angela. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn things over to you. Oh no. I have to accept the transcription. There we go. All right, over to you, Angela.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I'll let Shayna reshare, and as she's doing that, just highlight, like, couldn't agree more on so much of what you said, and Simon as well, about process being such a key piece of this work.
Right now.
Yes.
Desktop too.
There it is. There we go. That looks right. So, as Shana mentioned earlier, my name is Angela Corona. I work with Second Harvest Food Bank of Central Florida, and we convene a task force called the Health and Hunger Task Force, and I lead that group. Our task force is a multi-sector coalition with a focus on food as medicine and supporting our neighbors who are experiencing food insecurity through those food as medicine strategies. So we have about 20 organizations across 7 sectors who participate within the Health and Hunger Task Force, and we've been convening this group for about 9 years, so quite a long time. I will say over the last few years, we've really been shifting our focus towards more of a systems change lens and more of a collective impact framework. And with that shift has come more questions around data and how can we use data more strategically as a collaborative to be able to address bigger issues within our community, systemic issues within our community. And so when we did start collaborating with DataKind to build Ladder, it felt like a natural fit because that's right where we were at with our task force and where we were headed in terms of data. What I'm going to share with you today is a little bit about the considerations that we have as we're thinking about collaborating with data across organizations and how we're thinking about using Ladder in that process. We're still early in the process, but I think there's still some learnings that we can share along the way. Sheena, if you want to go to the next slide. The first thing I'll mention is that when we think about collaborating through our task force, we are definitely thinking about doing this in a phased approach. I think one big contextual piece of information about our coalition is that while I do think data is absolutely valued by the organizations that we work with, we have never worked together around data. So we don't have a shared norm, we don't have a shared culture around this. And while we now have a shared tool, that's just one piece of the bigger puzzle. And so as much as I want to jump in and just say, throw your data in, let's see what it looks like, let's collaborate, we're not going to be doing that. We are taking a phased approach. And our phased approach is starting with actually not asking people to share in data at all. We are actually looking at what are the population level indicators that we want to focus on as a task force. What are the priority indicators that we want to track moving forward so we can see trends across our community? The nice thing about that is that nobody has to collect any data and nobody has to upload any organizational or private data into Ladder at this time. We have been able to identify indicators of interest, most of which are already in Ladder, which has been super helpful. And anything that hasn't been in Ladder, we've been able to download off of publicly available data sources online and upload it pretty easily. So we've been able to get started with publicly available data. This process has also really helped us as a task force hone in on what our data indicators and priorities are, because prior to this data strategy and Ladder, we didn't have focus areas necessarily around what we were tracking across the community. So this whole phase 1 process of identifying population level indicators has led to the image that you see on the right. It's really helped us hone what our strategy is going to be moving forward, not just for population level, but other data that we have moving forward. Phase 2 of this work will be actually asking people to upload data into the Ladder tool. And we are planning to very much take the lead of the stakeholders within their organizations. We don't expect everyone to be uploading every bit of data that they have. We expect to go slow and hopefully increase the amount of data people are sharing over time. I'll also mention with the phased approach, the nice thing about this is it orients people to Ladder as the tool that we're going to use in a really strategic way as well. Because we helped develop Ladder, we have members of our task force who are at varying levels of using Ladder. Some aren't in it at all. Some might be using it for their organization, but nobody yet is using it collaboratively. So with the population level indicators, what we're doing is we're setting up our Health and Hunger Task Force team within Ladder, and we're planning to invite all of our task force members as viewers to that team, where they're going to be able to see all of our indicators of interest in one place. So that will be an opportunity for them to join Ladder if they haven't, for them to see what the sharing of data looks like. and for them to get a feel for what this could look like to work collaboratively together using this tool. So we're thinking about it as a phased approach, not just for organizations and their comfortability sharing data, but also as a phased approach for getting people used to the tool and using it. I think the other piece that we're looking at as we talk about a strategy for our data and working across organizations is ensuring that engagement from our membership organizations is paramount throughout this process. That is a core tenet of our task force already. So in a lot of ways, we have built the structure of our task force around engagement and feedback of our membership, and we were able to leverage that into building out this data strategy together. So for example, the population level indicators, that is a process that involved multiple meetings with our members. So we have a general membership. We met with them regularly. We also then had a working group, a smaller group of folks who was saying that, hey, we need to kind of move this work forward between meetings, make some decisions, figure out how to collaborate, like put all of this into the image that you see here. And then we have a steering committee. And the steering committee is going to be figuring out, okay, how do we take this data strategy and turn it into the work that we're doing as a collective? So we have all these pieces to have engagement as a key piece of the process throughout. And for us, that's really critical because for our coalition, it is voluntary. So nobody is required to be at the table and no one is required to participate in any of the initiatives that we do. So by having an engaging process throughout and getting feedback throughout, our hope is that people are going to be invested in this strategy and in wanting to collaborate because they helped build the process to get us there. And then the final piece that I think kind of goes hand in hand with engagement is really building systems, building trusting systems. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we don't have norms around sharing data. We don't have a culture of doing that. So I do think this is going to be very new for a lot of the organizations within our task force. And it's a vulnerable thing to do. And so we want to make sure that we're building trust throughout the process. I think part of that is the engagement that we're already doing. But I think there's also something to be said for intentional systems and making sure that you have structures in place to ensure that the trust is able to be built. So when we talk about trusting systems, the two things I'm thinking through and we're thinking through as a leadership team is really one, communication systems and strategies, and then two, agreements. When I'm thinking about communication, I'm thinking about clear and transparent communication around what is our plan and what are we planning to do. I think it's really important that people know from the beginning, this is where we're headed. This is what we're trying to get towards. We're not hiding the fact that we're hoping to move towards sharing data collaboratively. And we have a plan and a roadmap in place for that. But as we start to get to sharing, I think it's going to be equally as important to make sure that people understand what happens when you upload your data into Ladder, who's going to have access to it, what can they do with that data. We don't want anyone to be surprised. And so when we think about the uploads and sharing, we certainly want to leverage resources that DataKind is making available in terms of trainings and documentation on their website. But we also know we have a responsibility to make sure that we have workflows in place and processes in place that are written out for our membership to be able to look at and reference. So we're thinking through the communication piece. And then in terms of agreements, our task force is not the most bureaucratic. We don't have a lot. We don't want to be too bureaucratic-y. And sometimes people feel like, oh, agreements, like that's getting a little bit too much. But I actually think agreements can be really helpful in terms of shared expectations and shared accountability. And so we want to build an agreement that is informed by the members of our task force. And so that will be the next step as we move towards data sharing, is to help build out what that agreement looks like with their input. So it's not too overly formal, but really hits the mark on the shared expectations and accountability, so that as a viewer, I know when I go into Ladder, I can trust the data that's there. And that as a contributor, when I go in and upload stuff to Ladder, I have clear expectations around the data quality, around how often I need to be updating that data to make it a useful tool for the entire community. So those are some of the pieces that we're looking at and how we're thinking about structuring some of this work moving forward. Again, we're still in the early stages. We're launching our task force group this Friday with our next task force meeting. So we're going to be getting everyone into Ladder to see our publicly available population level indicators, and we're excited to see what happens next, and we're grateful for the partnership with DataKind to help us do that. Thank you. I'll turn it back over to Shayna.
Thank you so much. Can you all hear me okay? Thank you so much, Angela and Sarah, for really just sharing your thoughtful insights. Again, this is not just exclusively about the tool, it's about the process and really sharing from both of your perspectives how that's come into play in thinking about ladder and ultimately with the goals that you're both trying to achieve. So would love to welcome the opportunity for a moment. If someone has a question around the collaborative process, what you heard from Angela and Sarah, welcome to put your thoughts into the Q&A part of the chat. There should be an icon, a Q&A icon, if you have questions around that. Okay. I see there's a question specific to ladder, and we'll have time to respond to that in just a few moments. But want to see if anyone has questions around the collaborative process. And really appreciate, Jen Rose, your good point in the chat that really resonated. Data moving at the speed of trust. That's definitely a real piece. And thank you for dropping an additional resource around data sharing as well. Right, I'm just going to take a quick look to see if there's a collaborative specific question. And we'll have additional time, like I said, at the end to answer broader questions as well. There is a good question that could be for either Sarah or Angela. So I'm going to spotlight you both to weigh in. There's a really good question around any tips for co-creating expectations for data quality and sharing. So just, there's no right or wrong answer, just hearing from your perspective and experience, any thought that you all have.
Sure, I can take a stab first. I think that having gotten a certain amount into this project with Hedgie, I think that if I'd started with the basic data questions, I think that could have better informed what kind of data quality we need to hit. And so I would say like trying to understand what the actions, the intended actions are going to be based on the tool. And from there, building back like, okay, what kind of granularity do we need? Do we need to be tracking things? If this were like internal data, do we need to build out additional like data questions in our system? Do we need to have additional trainings on how to enter information correctly, or can we build like a workflow that helps people avoid those data errors? So I think it really stems from that intended action point, the kind of work that ties directly to the value or to the mission of that group. And then from there, you'll have a much better way of seeing how things tie up into that main goal.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think I'll add for us as we think about like data quality across organizations, that is definitely something we're wanting to be thoughtful of. And I will say, I think creating the standard might be the easier part than ensuring then that the standard gets followed. I think we have a good amount of data-minded folks within the task force, and I feel like through some good facilitated discussion, we could get to agreement on that. I think what I most worry about is when we start putting data in, how do we manage and maintain those standards? And how do we do that in a way that's kind and thoughtful of the fact that not everybody who might be participating in that collaborative is a data person. And so I anticipate that we may need to do some data capacity building for folks who are maybe at smaller organizations and they don't have a data person to help them clean their data. That's definitely something we're thinking about in terms of capacity building to ensure that they understand the concepts that we're looking at in terms of data quality and cleaning, and have that approach as they're uploading their data in.
Great. Thanks to you both on that. There's another good question around any insight when you're the only person in your organization that's considered the data person. How do you make collaboration work between non-data peers? That may be, Sarah, I'm thinking of thoughts that you may have around that, just recognizing data capacity on your team. So any thoughts you'd like to share?
I love this so much. I think that, there's a whole spectrum of comfort with the traditionally defined data that we work with, but I think it's also important to expand our interpretation of what data means and can mean, because I think when I go into a coworker's office and I see that she has a list of the different countries where she's helping, immigrants apply for like citizenship, and she's got just stars for each person, like that is a type of data. And so it's like, how do we capitalize on like the stories and the values that people have and help show them like this is another way that we can kind of showcase what you're doing and capture what you're already contributing to. Like with our um, intake team, like they do a lot of kind of thankless work of like inputting a lot of information. And so in addition to like having them be part of the input, I want them to see like the stories of like really impactful cases that we had. So I built out a report that they could see on their dashboard that has like the highlights of like how people have been helped by our work. And so I think it's, making more visible how the steps of their day-to-day work tie into our mission and helping them realize like the information you're putting in is, it's your hard work. It's also part of the data ecosystem. And so, we can have these highlights of your outcomes, and we can also help you like ask more questions about how to do that work more impactfully. So I think just meeting people where they're at and appreciating the work that they're doing can be a great way to start building that data capacity.
Thanks so much. That was such a great question on that. Let's see, what else? Thoughts on collaboration to address inclusiveness and equity from Sarah, Angela's area of work. Any of you want to share thoughts around that?
Okay, I'll go first and then Sarah can go. We're definitely thinking about equity as we're looking at putting our collaborative together. What we're most excited about with Ladder is that we can upload lots of data sources and look at them again, overlaying them. And so, for example, we have some data on maternal health that we were able to pull from our Florida chart system, and it was broken down not just by all preterm births, but preterm births by race and ethnicity. So it was easy to upload all of those different data sets into the tool, and it's easy to be able to turn things on as needed. So I definitely think we're looking at how we can leverage Ladder as a way to look at equity across the work that we're doing.
Yeah. And I think in our work related to these operating sites, you'll notice they don't really have anything related to like language services. But if there were ways that our group started collecting that information, if they became aware of it, we could create, an additional indicator, both in Airtable and in Ladder, that could start kind of mapping that availability and that access. So I think it's a very flexible tool in that way. And I think just outside of it, general practices for trying to maintain inclusiveness and equity is thinking about like as technology is developing, how do we make sure that our programs have access to, if there are translation options that we can use with our database, or there's an integration that Legal Server has developed. I'm getting in the weeds here, where people can get real-time updates on the status of their applications. So I've invited our entire immigration team to attend that just to see for themselves like what that kind of integration looks like with another organization. So it's thinking like I'm not trying to be like the gatekeeper of information, but allowing people to attend and like get their own value from these presentations.
Great. Sarah and Angela, thank you so much for staying on a few more minutes to answer some really good questions that are coming in for everyone. I wanted to answer another question from someone that asked around collaboration, specifically the team function of Ladder. So I'm happy to answer that in a couple of different ways. Fortunately, we did do a previous webinar that goes into a deeper dive into ladder and specifically the teaming functions that were referenced. So first, we'll be sure that all of you have access to the entire playlist. But as it relates specifically to the team function in this question, there is indeed an admin role that can give permissions on what level of engagement you invite a team member to view the data. So you can invite someone from a view only access. You can invite someone to a team and allow them view access as well as the ability to upload the data. So there are different permissions that an admin that creates a team has the flexibility to do. But like I said, I'll look forward to sharing the playlist with everyone to definitely dive deeper into some of those collaborative functions. So thanks for all those great thoughts and questions that everyone has shared. So I'd like to go and segue. We talked a little bit about ladder, and I'd like to share a couple of additional tools from DataKind that you may consider collaborating around, and then we'll have the opportunity to also hear about other tools from the St. Louis area and even from you all if you have collaborative tools that you have found to be helpful in your community. So first up, we have FEAT, our foreclosure and eviction analysis tool. This is a web application built in partnership with New America to help local housing leaders, advocates, and researchers analyze and combat housing loss, specifically evictions and looking at foreclosures using data. FEAT helps users upload local housing data and combine it with census info and visualize trends to understand who, where, and when the housing loss occurs, therefore enabling data-driven policy and support. And by the way, we'll be sure to also share the links to these tools as well. Next, we have the Economic Opportunity Datascape, known as the EO Datascape. It's a data platform that aggregates and standardizes public data on the financial well-being of U.S. communities at the 2020 U.S. Census tract boundaries. Users can access over 300 data indicators related to the finance community. Users can create and preview custom data sets across public indicators and export data that's ready for analysis or visualization. Now, as you all may be hearing about some of the functionality of these tools, we recognize there's an opportunity as we have evaluated these tools and based on hearing users that have engaged in FEAT, EO Datascape, and even Ladder, DataKind has recognized that there's an actual opportunity to unify the key functionalities of all of these collective tools, with the Ladder functionality being a core component, combining that into one U.S. communities platform that we will be excited to launch at the end of March 2026. So we're really excited to be able to bring the best of the features from those respective tools and bring that into this platform. This is the roadmap of some of the features that we'll be looking to bring together, the ability to have that saved analysis. We've heard a lot of interest around having congressional district geographic level, adding additional public data sets and even disaggregated demographic data, looking at aggregation functionality and then UX improvements. We've heard a lot about how we can support users in being able to upload their data in a way that's accessible to them. And forward-looking, we will be looking at a beta API capabilities and other additional functionality. So excited to preview and share that with you all. And now that you've heard tools from DataKind, like to allow you all the opportunity to hear about some exciting tools in the St. Louis area. For those of you that are local here, I'm going to invite Sarah Mohammed, the Engagement and Equity Lead from the Community Innovation and Action Center at the University of Missouri at St. Louis, to introduce her colleague, Dave Mininger, who will share more. So without further ado, I'm going to invite you, Sarah, to come aboard and introduce Dave.
Great. Thanks so much, Shana.
Hi, everyone. For those of you that don't know me, I mean, Shayna just gave a really nice introduction, so I appreciate that. But have been kind of working behind the scenes to help with like the planning pieces of these webinar series, and have been present at all of them, enjoying learning about the content. But today I get the pleasure to introduce Dave Menninger. And he is, I mean, just on a personal level, we have had the great ability to work together. And Dave is just a kind and like always willing to help type of person. And one time I think I sent him a message. This was when he just started working, and I was like, I need a map for this. And here's all the data. Can you put this together? And he just did it. And I was blown away, and I already knew that he was going to be such a huge asset to our team. But on a more professional side, Dave is our data analyst and web developer for SEAC. His work, which he's going to be talking specifically about some of the projects that he's worked on, have involved the development of the St. Louis Community Investments Map, St. Louis Vacant Property Explorer, St. Louis Neighborhood Organizations Map and Directory, and the St. Louis Landlords Cases website. And so he's going to talk to us a little bit more about these different projects and what he's been able to do. So yeah, without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Dave.
All right. Thank you so much, Sarah. And thanks to DataKind for this whole series. It's super interesting. What they're doing is fantastic and really making data accessible for folks. I'm going to start by in the chat, I'll put links to the maps and data tools I'll be talking about. And then I need to share
Okay,
my
Dave, stop
screen.
sharing. So try again. I just took
Yeah,
my screen off. Great.
be going.
It's
Computer's
working its
thinking.
way up there. It
All right. Hopefully you all can see that.
hasn't come up yet. Oh, there we go. There
Okay.
was a little bit of lag time. We're good now.
Okay. All right. So the three tools I'm going to be talking about are all community-oriented St. Louis specific tools that have come about as the result of multiple collaborations. It's been a fun journey. The first tool is the City Investments and Planning Map. And it's really the result of a close collaboration with the city and the brainchild of Noel Pfeffer, who is the director of the Community Development Administration at the city. And it features all these community-specific investments that have been made in neighborhoods across the city. And it has all these categories like housing, vacancy interventions, neighborhood transformation. And underneath each of those, there are a bunch of subcategories as well. Um, and for all of this information, you can click into the specific items on the map and get details about, oh yeah, this is where this project was, this is the awarded amount, this is where the funding came from. So it's an interesting way to look across activity across the city. There's some planning related layers and some transportation, some overlays if you want to be able to see outlines of the neighborhoods or wards or census tracts. You can do all of that. There's a way to filter by funding. So if you only wanted to see, let's say, things that were ARPA funded, then you get those to show up on the map. So I'll turn all of those back on. Another interesting thing here is, and what the city was really after was being able to go out into the communities and say, here's what's been going on in your specific community. So there's a way to filter down to just a particular location, a zip code, an organizational footprint. So I will do focus in on the Greaterville. And when I close that, now it's just showing me focused in on the Greaterville, all of the investments here. And the nice thing that is in
Yeah,
addition,
he can do that. I don't know any reason why he wouldn't be here because we're not doing.
it sounds like someone is off
Yes,
mute, about to get
apologies.
muted. But the cool thing in here is you can view a report and you see just for the greater Ville, it does by all the categories and subcategories, counts and total amounts for just that neighborhood of the Ville, and also broken down by funding sources. So it's kind of a cool way to dive in. So that's the first tool I wanted to share. The second one is this St. Louis neighborhood map. And this really came about as a result of a collaboration with Dana Malkus and the Vacancy Collaborative. And she was trying to figure out where are all the footprints of all the neighborhood associations in St. Louis, because she needs to be able to help identify and create neighborhood organizations to play an active role in addressing vacancy. So we built this map, and it has additional layers now in addition to neighborhood associations. But for any given uh, specific geographic footprint on the map or organization, you can get all the details about that organization, how to reach out to them, the hours that they have their meetings, when they have their meetings. Um, so it's really meant to be a resource for the city in general. And we've also added things like federated block units onto this map. So you can see where all of those are. Oh, a little bit of a delay there. Um, CDCs, um, anything that has a specific geographic footprint. We also added like the city's neighborhood stabilization staff, so you can see where they work in the city. And there it is. And you can get information about anyone there. So it's really meant to be this local resource kind of directory. You can view things as a list. Um, and I believe we also had it so you can export it in different ways if you need to, and potentially get some of that into DataKind, into Ladder. So that is that tool. And the last tool I wanted to touch on was this St. Louis vacancy map. And this is a result of work with the Vacancy Collaborative and Legal Services of Eastern Missouri in the city. It's a big partnership to put this all together. But this is really trying to see where are all the vacant properties in the city of St. Louis. And you can dive in, you can just look at buildings, you can look at private lots. And when you go in and you click on specific properties, you can find out who's the owner. You can get an assessment of how likely is that property vacant, what's the burden score on the city. With some of these, they'll be owned by multiple property owners, so you can see the other properties that entity owns and get a general read on this little red and orange bar is how much of the vacancy and burden there are for these properties. So it's a quick way to dive in and try to better understand vacancy in specific neighborhoods. And legal services has a special version that they can log into and see their casework overlaid on this map. And you can also, there's a list version here, and you can download a spreadsheet for any given neighborhood. Then you could take that into Ladder, for example, and see what that looks like with the other data that they can show you. So those are the tools that I wanted to touch on, and I'll turn it back over to Sarah, but thanks again to DataKind.
Great. Thanks so much, Dave. Shayna, were you gonna pull slides back up with the questions on them?
Yes,
Okay.
definitely. Let me make sure I do that. If you'll just give me a moment. We're toggling between screens here, so we'll get that set up for everyone. In the meantime, Dave, thank you so much. This has been very, sorry, I muted myself, just to hear about all the tools that have been coming to St. Louis and the development and looking at that at a neighborhood basis. So thank you. And with that said, Sarah, let me know if you see the screen.
I do, yes. Okay, so we would love to take a minute to hear from y'all. We know that not everyone is from St. Louis, and we have a wide variety of people here from different areas. So we kind of want to know, you're welcome to put this in the chat or come off mute. Um, a few questions. So, what tools do you know about and use in your local community? And then what is your collaborative process in general around data, or how you're thinking about leveraging data when using Ladder or other tools? And then what type of support helped or would help you to access and use those tools? So we have a couple different questions there. You can choose to respond to any one of those, and would love to hear from a few people. So feel free to put your response in the chat or come off mute and verbally say your response. Perfect. Hey, Sal.
Good morning, everyone. Every time I come to these, it's like another world opens up, and it's very important. And in my mind, when I'm looking at the collaborative efforts, those are great. Uh, but when it comes to data, the question that keeps rolling around in my mind and the issues that our organization or this our organization deals with is data equals people. And this is great, but the demographic data is somehow missing because we know people live in the community and they have social demographic data or socioeconomic demographic data, uh, language data, who speaks English, who doesn't. And it'd be nice to overlay, like for the opioid crisis, we see two different maps, but no single report that combines the data. It's and the unfortunate thing is that the data usually comes out in reports as black, white, and other, and it leaves us short in terms of justifying policies. Because if you're not in the data and you're poor and or can't speak English, then the reports and the policies and the reports that follow don't reflect that reality. And so too often, whether it's socioeconomic data, like the workforce development data that I've seen off and on, that report doesn't even the state of the workforce doesn't even have demographic data, doesn't even include socioeconomic data. So how can you prioritize in terms of needs?
Yeah, definitely a big issue that yeah, continues to come up. I hear you, Sal. Yeah. Dave, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think in some ways the tool that DataKind has created in Ladder is something that's really going to be oriented toward being able to see these different data sets overlapped. Like they cover a number of those things they have as built-in layers that you could see, and with their facility to bring in whatever spreadsheet you want of locations, then you'd be getting that. But I agree, it's problematic and difficult because even with the ACS census data, like you really have to be smart about paying attention to the numbers of the margin of error. And sometimes like their coverage is less good in poorer neighborhoods. And that's a combination of factors going on, but it's real.
Yeah. Well, Shayna,
Yeah,
Sarah was asking if she could share her screen so that she could show some of the demographic um, information available.
Yeah, and Sarah, I think you should be able to, while you get your screen up, Sal, I'll also validate your point and welcome anyone in the chat that, if this resonates with you or if you know of additional resources, this is about knowledge sharing. And Sal, we've heard that too, and we're actually looking forward to partnering with a couple of organizations that serve various communities to think about how to add those demographic data sets, not just within Ladder, but even helping those organizations that may be looking to collect that and think about where it makes sense to upload as a piece within Ladder. So thank you for highlighting that. And Sarah, we can see your screen now.
Yeah, great. Thank you for bringing this up, Sal. I know it's been an ongoing issue of do we have data that is kind of able to show the differences that people are experiencing within an overall indicator. So in the population data on Ladder, so I usually use zip code just because that's what we have in our database, so it's easiest to kind of match on zip code. But you can go down to the population section and they have, again, it's not including every racial identity. They do have white, non-Hispanic, Hispanic or Latino, Black or African American. And so you can look at those kind of indicators as well as a combination of if people are receiving food stamps and their racial identity. So that's just an example of what Ladder has built in. But as Dave was saying, I definitely see that we can upload our own data and say if we want to look at different populations over St. Louis and where they overlap with different health indicators or different transit access, those are things that we could do using our own disaggregated data.
Yeah, and there's two categories that are available, and unfortunately, we live in an environment. I'm just going to play it this way, where certain data is being, how can I say this? It's not there. It used to be there, but it's no longer there. But there is limited English proficient data by language. I mean that is available. It's limited. And the other data point that the children 5 years and older, 5 to 18 years old, who live in households where another language other than English is spoken. So it'd be nice when you talk about layer, if they could include the people and provide us the people with in most need for everybody. I mean, it's great to have all those maps, but what does it mean to the people that live in those communities and who are the people?
Yeah, that's a great point, Sal. Thank you for bringing it up. And yeah, definitely an ongoing issue, especially in St. Louis. So yeah. Um, well, anybody else have anything to add either to what Sal was bringing up or in general as a response to these discussion questions? Oh, and I think I had seen some in the chat, so let me just look at that really quick. So Colleen mentioned Tableau as a favorite because it's pretty and makes pretty things, which is very valid. Uses Excel most day to day. Yeah, yeah, definitely. I know Tableau is a favorite for many people. Oh, nice, Sarah. Shane, I'll point you to share Sarah's chat there. Are there natural language interfaces so we don't have to remember all of the filter option details? That seems like a Shayna question.
We don't currently, but these are such good points of feedback that we've been collecting from folks in an effort to improve Ladder. So even when we get to that next launch, we still want to engage in conversation. And we'll talk in a few minutes about how you all can be a part of the conversation as we see this series as not an endpoint, but an opportunity to continue engagement.
Yeah. seems like we've got a few other recommendations. 211 counts. Not a tool that allows you to download and upload your own data, but a great visualization of 211 calls and needs. Yes, very good to know. Doris mentions ArcGIS. Yeah. Great. Um, Policy Map and Social Explorer. Mm, yep. Awesome. Anyone want to talk about the types of support that would help you access any of these tools or would help you access Ladder? Like what, and some of you have already brought up things. So anything else you want to mention there? Mm.
I'll just note, Sarah, what we hear a lot on our end is where there's ability to engage in training or potential use case development, but kind of starting at the training point, how to utilize a tool, and more importantly, how does it really connect back to the pain point that an organization, either a pain point or the question that an organization wants to utilize. So while, there's certain abilities to be able to provide training, I know from DataKind's perspective, we always want to start with the question first to get clarity around what the needs are, and then think through, how Ladder can be supportive in that way. But we've also heard, and that's part of where we're updating the tool to incorporate additional training opportunities. And again, we'll talk about how you all can connect with us. But that's just one thing I've heard, Sarah, in terms of support, training materials, things of that nature.
Great. Well, Shayna, it looks like we still have a few responses coming in, but I'll go ahead and hand it back over to you.
Yes, thanks so much, Sarah. Appreciate that. And I'm going to adjust the spotlight again, multitasking here. Great. Can you all still see my screen? Perfect. Thanks for the thumbs up, Dave. So wanted to be able, we're gonna go into answering some additional questions, so there'll be some time for that. But in the meantime, we would like to share with you a couple of questions just to get your feedback around whether today's webinar and what you've learned so far has resonated. This is one of those questions where we really want to get honest feedback from you all. You'll see on your screen, has your knowledge around today's topic, what you've heard, changed as a result of the event? There's no right or wrong answer. Has it increased? Is it about the same? Or you're not sure, you're still processing. That's going to help us not just only in understanding how today's webinar and the other ones have been beneficial, but it could help us in terms of, again, this is not the endpoint. There could be opportunities to see where additional support has been provided. So it looks like I'll give a couple of more seconds before we end the poll. This is all anonymous, and then we'll share the results. I'll go ahead and end. And let's see, it looks like for most of you, yes, it has increased your knowledge. Some of you are still processing, you're not sure. That is completely okay. And for some of you, it's about the same. And that's great too. We have one more question that I'd like to get you all's feedback on, which is based on what you've learned today. Do you see an opportunity where you can actually incorporate what you learned today? And we have a scale there from very likely to somewhat likely, sort of in the middle, perhaps not at all. Again, no right or wrong answer, just getting a sense of how today's knowledge sharing has resonated based on what you've heard. And then after we share the results of that, we will go into any additional questions or knowledge sharing that people want to share today. This originated as a St. Louis community series, and we found that it resonated across the area. And so we want to invite folks to share their thoughts. Okay, we'll go ahead and end the poll here and share results. The majority, actually, it's kind of a tie, likely and somewhat likely, were the top choices there. So again, just based on the previous responses of the question that was asked before, some of you are still processing. That may be indicative in some of these responses here that you see on the screen. And that is completely okay. We really appreciate you all sharing your thoughts. Okay, great. So with that said, what I'm going to do is we're going to go into questions. So I'm going to take a look at the chat as well as Q&A. So I may, depending on the question, invite some of our speakers to share their thoughts as well. Let's see, let's take a look at the Q&A. There is a good, oh, yes, I
I was
heard.
going to say, Shayna, while you're doing that, I can speak to one of them
Oh,
real
perfect.
quickly,
Go
which is
ahead.
Colleen talked about not being able to share data in ladder, like working in higher education, or maybe there's some other instance where you think, I don't know if I can upload data into an external tool or if this would be looked down upon. Sarah noted you don't need to share the data publicly to collaborate in ladder, so you can use the Teams function even just as a workspace, a shared workspace between you and your team to collaborate, because sometimes just strategizing around data takes looking at data together in the space. But I just want to point out that as well, even if people aren't ready to upload data or aren't sure about that aspect, one way that I found Ladder very useful, you can create maps in Ladder that sort of looks at what's going on regionally, like pull up different indicators that are preloaded. You don't have to have any prior data experience to do that. Make maps that say, hey, here's who's eligible for SNAP benefits. Here's what, whatever indicators you're interested in that have to do with maybe income or, you know, demographics of the area that you're looking at. And then side by side, you can look at some other maps that you may, or other data that you may have mapped. Either another organization has already mapped it, or you have another program that you use. And even just looking at those things side by side can be very helpful to get a quick snapshot of like, what other indicators are happening in the region? I go to Ladder for that. I quickly select interesting, relevant indicators, and then I just look side by side. So I just want to mention that. I know that people have done that, and it's a useful way to utilize Ladder as well.
And Jen Rose, thank you for highlighting that, because I think that's a very important point. And we actually talked a little bit about that in a previous webinar. I'd like to invite Sarah or Angela. I think, Sarah, you talked a little bit in the last webinar about how you interfaced or used Ladder first, looking at the public indicators, to Jen Rose's point, before even going to like using the Teams or collaborative function. So Sarah and or Angela, would welcome any thoughts you have around like, how did you first engage? And then I would also like to add a really good point made around, what types of data to upload. Certainly we defer to your organization's policy and practices around that. But we did also talk about, what are some general data guidance and thinking about what to upload. But even taking a step back and looking at the public data sets, I'll see if Sarah or Angela would like to comment on that.
Sure. I initially I just played around with the different available indicators that were already uploaded. So I looked at, I think, the percentage of households that were getting food stamps in the region. And then I was curious as to how our case data reflected that. And so I think I can actually share my screen again. No, sorry, I closed out of the presentation. But I created just a table that showed the number of cases per zip code of our food stamp cases. And then I uploaded that to Ladder, and then I looked at, areas that had a higher population, but that comparatively had like a lower number of food stamp cases, just to see, oh, maybe people aren't as aware of our services in these areas. And that didn't involve any like private information from our clients. It was just the number of cases per zip code. So I think that's something that feels pretty safe to share externally. I did still check in with our director because I wanted to make sure that we're okay with sharing like the number of our cases that we have in different zip codes in a more public setting like this. So I would say like if it's institutional data that you just want to get the go ahead, but and sharing in a wider setting, but I feel very safe about uploading like generally like aggregate data to Ladder because it's something that is informative but doesn't tell you who the people are.
Yeah, and I can add to that in terms of when I first started using Ladder, a lot of the work that we do is at the intersection of food insecurity and chronic illness. And so I was excited to finally have the ability to put our Feeding America Map the Meal Gap data on top of rates of diabetes to show where our priority areas where we might want to be focusing our efforts. And I think in terms of uploads, one of the easiest types of uploads I have found is just sites. So we have several hundred food pantries, for example, across our network throughout the community. And to be able to see our sites overlaid on top of that food insecurity and diabetes data really is a great way to help us figure out, hey, where could we target some of our locations to better do some food as medicine and health initiatives through our network of partners.
Thank you for that, Angela. Just looking around, scanning the Q&A. I'm looking between the chat as well as the Q&A. There was a question around what can I do to make more data available in California? I'd love to hear if there are any California organizations on the call that have thoughts around making more data publicly available. I think that's what it's referring to. If there's any collaboratives or sources that you all know of, would love to defer to any organizations represented in the spirit of knowledge sharing there. So thanks for that question. There was a question for Dave. Any opportunity to do the same work for St. Louis County? It sounds like you may be an idea is pitching your way. So not to put you on the spot, but
Yeah. The legal services has been working with some folks in the county, and there's a new state law that has allowed them to build land banking and do vacancy work. I assume they're talking about vacancy work in the county as opposed to the community investments map. But that we've heard from some folks there, the real challenge in the county is it's a real trick with the data because you have so many different municipalities, whereas, the city, it's all one source that we can work with. But the data is such kind of a little bit of a mess in the county that's the first hurdle there.
yeah, thank you for that, Dave. Someone had a specific question. Does Ladder have an indicator with the new opportunity zones that are getting updated in 2026? So actually that will be part of our update process. So in our economic opportunity datascape, we do have data around opportunity zones. So not only are we looking to bring that data set into the platform as a whole within Ladder, but also updating respective data sets as well. So we're going to be doing all those pieces at the same time at the most current year that's available for us to utilize. So thank you for that question there. There's lots of good conversation. Yeah, going back to Colleen's point, thanks so much highlighting education. I think this is the part that goes back to what is the question you're looking for, looking at data guidelines and privacy, because we know within higher education or some disciplines that there is increased sensitivity around privacy that needs to be adhered to and come first before utilizing the tool. And I think that's part of what Angela's story speaks to a little bit in terms of working across different sectors. In that example, sort of thinking through what's appropriate, what makes sense. So appreciate you highlighting that important nuance because there are, really across any domain wanting to look at privacy and how one is using data and for what purpose, wanting to be intentional around that and not just for the sake of using data. So great points made in the chat there. Also good points, there's been a thread in the conversation just around how Ladder could be utilized or other tools as well. So I'd love to highlight, because time flew by. My goodness, there's been such great engagement and participation for everyone. What's next? We're going to follow up with a post-event email and survey because we want to hear if you joined just this webinar or any of the others. We would love to hear from you, your open feedback. Was it helpful? Are there things that could be improved? Any and all feedback is welcome. So we will share that survey with you. We will share this recording, the links to all of the tools. This is about taking what resonates with you. So don't feel that you have to ingest everything that you've heard and go out and it's a race to start utilizing these tools. Really, it's an opportunity, as some of you, noted, to reflect, take what is meaningful to you all, and we will share additional resources from our speakers today. You can certainly have access to Ladder. And then if at any point you want to connect back with us, here's my email there, and we'll be sure to include Jen Rose. Apologies. The Data for Social Impact Team contact is Jen Rose. So we'll be sure to include her contact email as well. But really just want to thank you all for joining us today. Thank you to all of our speakers that have shared their insights and perspectives around collaboration, because again, a tool is a tool. But we recognize there's other important elements when looking at, sharing data and answering questions in service to one's community, first and foremost, as data are people and they're a representative of their experiences. So thank you so much for your time. Please expect that follow-up email in the next day or so. And thank you all. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, everyone.